now here comes the message. Many in the congregation know, my kids who grew up here, you know my middle daughter, Kayla. For those of you who don't, she's a smart, hardworking extrovert who really fought for progressive causes her whole life, particularly starting in 7th grade with her internship as a legislative page. Then she did everything else to succeed. She was a legislative aide in our state legislature and in Congress. She has a master's degree in political science. Everything to groom herself to be a great candidate in the Democratic Party. She said no. She said, "Mom, what's all your anti-racist work for if I'm going to take the spot? No, I'm going to work for someone from the communities that I hope progressive policies will serve and put them at the front. I'm going to step aside so that those from minority communities can step up into the available leadership roles." She's right. This next generation may have it right. Today, I plan with my voice as a mother, educator, and member of this congregation to tell of my many faltering steps to become what is now called anti-racist. I hope that by listening with curiosity, you will see parallels in your own life, and that each of us will find a better way to improve our efforts, to decrease the harm we may have caused by old practices or the way we used to word things, and understand our own privileges. Like maybe our sons and daughters have already learned to embrace. The message is wrestling with what black leaders you call an ally. When white or white passing people go into communities of color to work, they may be coming to rescue and walk those there towards assimilation or towards a center of whiteness. That's termed the savior approach. To be an ally, one would work to hold up and recognize the brilliance of the culture within the community by working under the guidance of those in the community. Now, on my wall is a scrap of paper, very worn, with the steps to be an anti-racist. Get close. Go into the communities that are suffering from the racist policies of our past and the institutionalized racism we live in today. Think about the stories that your bias tells you or that you may have heard growing up that need to change. Step 3. See the good. And that's easy when you work with young people. And the 4th is to be willing to be uncomfortable, vulnerable, not belonging, not really sure what to do. Be willing to walk into those situations and know that you are doing your work by doing that. I always sought to work under the supervision of African American leaders, and I sought to work in collaboration with Black colleagues. And of course, I realized how much I didn't know. So here was one of my favorite lines that I needed to say quite a bit. Okay, I understand. Thank you. If it's something you don't know, just accept that you don't know it. Now, why is this worth saying? That when I came into teaching, I had so much to learn. Well, it's because I had felt called to anti-racist work since Martin Luther King's funeral. And I made a conscious choice to educate myself in high school and then in college. In college, I worked with the Black Student Union, the Hispanic Student Union, the Feminist Alternative, CPE. I worked with multiracial colleagues to bring progressive speakers to the university. I learned so much from them. I also learned how sheltered I had been. Being sheltered means you're going to embarrass yourself. So that is a clue of life to try to be unembarrassable, because you're not doing your work if you're only in situations where you feel right at home. I asked dumb questions in college. I found holes in my education big enough to drive a Mack truck through them. I was an avid reader, but clearly I was not well read. Through all of this, going to every speaker, seeing every film I could to understand the real history of America and capitalism, I was torn. And then I met one of our speakers. Some of you will know Tony Cade Bambara. And I was her walker through campus to all of the programs she was speaking at. And we got to know each other a little bit, and she gave me some advice. And she said, you know, education is a good field for someone who wants to be an activist and a writer like you do. That was what made me take my first course in education, even though I was almost finished with my degree in English and media production. Now, Ibram Kendi, the author and director of the Antiracist Research Center and Policy Center at American University, he said that when he went to graduate school, he made a conscious decision to move into an area of Philadelphia with poor blacks because he thought it was going to be valuable to see racism up close. That's kind of what I did too. As crazy as it sounded to my parents, my Ohio parents, I thought the way forward for me was to work in an environment where I was in the minority and where economic poverty reigned. I walked into Miami-Jackson Senior High to seek a job seeking English. I had no connection to Miami, but I did know it was a school system with academic freedom, that the union said you can pick your own books for the curriculum. That was very important to me because when you are going to be an anti-oppressor educator, you have to be able to choose controversial books. Here's a photo of the windowless room I inherited. The chalkboard was warped and you couldn't write on it wherever it was shiny, which thankfully was low, and I could use the high parts. I swept the asbestos paint chips every morning into the circular file because of the dampness each morning. Now, why didn't I question this? Why did I accept the definition that part of being at an inner city school, which is what they were called at the time, was that things could be in horrible shape? I thought the best thing for me to do was to not be bothered by it. We had books and each other in a beautiful courtyard, so that's what I did. And I thought that my credentials for social justice and calling out oppression would carry me through the faculty. I also thought that the goal was integration. Now remember, back in my day, that seemed to be the goal. Black leaders were integrating lunch counters, feminists were breaking glass ceilings to become airline pilots. So I thought that was our goal. But was I really trying to teach standard English and standard written English as part of an agenda to impart middle class values, or to say that this is what is really the correct or better way than the colloquial language you speak? Now, at Miami-Jackson, after the social unrest where police officer Luis Alvarez shot Neville Johnson at point-blank range in Overtown and then was acquitted, there was much social unrest in Miami. And at my school, we had a cultural relations retreat. I learned there that many of my colleagues, remember, the faculty was majority African American, they wished for a life minus white people. Those of us that came to integrate the faculty were ruining the setting for them. Here, when I thought we were all on the same page, we weren't even reading the same book. Were there Black or Afro-Latino 23-year-olds clamoring to teach language arts in a 100% free lunch school? Was I taking up a spot that would be better served by somebody else? Did my resume of great protests and commitment to allyship mean nothing? You can't go into teaching with a strong and fervent heart and not be hurt. The goal is to keep learning. Another first-year white teacher told me that she would leave at the end of the year. But I felt very at home. I was at home in the classroom with the students and the glorious neighborhood. But did I have inherent bias that I was giving without recognition? Now let's take a little break from the message here and my story of trying to be an ally as a public school teacher and just kind of talk about privilege. I was born with privileges and advantages. The one that helped me the most as a teacher was I was born tall. Well, I grew to be tall. I have no health issues. I'm cisgender and hetero, and my parents both worked, so they could afford to send my 3 siblings and I to college without debt. However, with all these advantages, I hope I am not judged on what I was born into, but what I chose to do with those privileges. In this school, I realized I didn't know Miami. I was from the Midwest. So I did everything to read about Miami history, but then I also asked my students to walk me around their neighborhoods after school. So one day I went south with one group of students and east and west. If you know where Miami-Jackson is, those neighborhoods are very different in each direction. And I learned a lot. Bocanicas are not all the same. Okay, some are Dominican and some are Central American, and there's a big difference. I learned that you can walk into some restaurants and they're secretly you buy, we fry. You can pick what you want and then they'll cook it from the bins of fish. I learned that where the kids all went for lunch, because we had an open campus, the kids all left for lunch. And I also learned that Conktown, USA does make the best fried conch in the entire United States. Now, my campus had 3 security guards and we felt perfectly safe. Now each school is armed to the teeth, but back in that day, Miss Correa could scare anybody, even though I knew she was not going to chase anybody. I grew to love that neighborhood. Michael and I lived 4 minutes away. So that idea that I learned in my anti-racist sheet of getting proximate came true. I was close. I changed the narrative. This was not a depressed area. This was a live and vital community with some excellent food, by the way. And of course I had hope. So many of my young people were actually, they had wise parents, but they were actually also helping their parents negotiate the modern day changes that were coming. And then, of course, I had many chances to be uncomfortable because the students began to invite me to things. Funerals and debutante balls and other things where I was often one of a few white people there. So I learned to just feel connected, and of course I always knew a lot of people there. And I think those 11 years at Miami-Jackson taught me so much. But I still wasn't sure if I wasn't harming. Finally, 2 of my African-American administrators, assistant principal and principal, convinced me I was an asset and not an alienator. And they reminded me of how many kids I helped get into those places of transformation called the Ivy Leagues and the junior Ivies and the state universities with high standards. And I also am reminded of what helped the students get into those places were not necessarily what I did in the classroom, but what I did in their communities with them. We tutored the middle school kids that had criminal arrest records as part of a court adjudication program. We were speakers with Planned Parenthood at local churches and other activities to decrease teen pregnancy and STDs. We worked in all kinds of homeless shelters with the Halloween parties, the Valentine's parties. We brought in embassy speakers. Working with the kids and their community is what made these kids a little bit more worldly and ready to leave and go to colleges very far away. And that also explains why I was a member here at this church, but I never took on any leadership here until about 5 years ago. So you begin to understand my life and my commitment to anti-racism, anti-sexism, and anti-classism. The idea that the poor have different barriers than the people of a different class. Now, I thought I would be at Jackson my whole life. I was very happy there, but I was called up the street after 2 more episodes of social unrest after police brutality and acquittals right here in Miami. The federal government was pouring money in here. We commonly called it riot money, to address the chronic underemployment of people in Liberty City, Brownsville, Allapattah, what we now call Miami Gardens, Opelika, and Overtown. So they created an experimental high school. Turner Tech was the first school to open in a 2-for-1 model. You got a full high school diploma as well as a full state certification in a vocational or technical area at the same time as high school in 4 years. So basically all of your electives were in state certified programs. The other thing that made this experimental was that all the classes were on academy. So if I was in an academy for finance, the English class emphasized finance, the math emphasized finance. You were with those students all along. It was not just one special class like now we call academy model schools. The most anti-racist thing about Turner Tech, though, was that it didn't track. It didn't tell some kids your advanced placement and other kids your regular. We treated the students all as smart and capable and as people that would want a good paying job right out of high school to finance their college or other programs that they wanted to do with their lives. Turner Tech was 1/3 African American, 1/3 Haitian American, and 1/3 Latinx. And the faculty was very integrated as well. The slide shows you a picture of the spoken word that was beginning at that time and that Turner Tech students really took to. I also, with colleagues, worked to bring a civil rights archive where we invited elders, politicians, or grandparents to come to the schools with their memorabilia. The students interviewed them. We filmed the stories of their childhood, the impact of the voting rights law on them, and their memorabilia, and gave them a copy of the VHS, which later became the CD, which later became the digital file at FIU's library. We created a women's history archive with all the local activists here in Miami for the Women's History Park on Flagler. We were the first to discover that the Hampton House needed historic renovation. We worked at Virginia Key and the Miami Marine Stadium. In other words, if you know a young person who wants to do good in this community, you can do it through teaching. Yes, it's hard. It's hard to, get a bus and head all the kids to Virginia Key and interview people who integrated that beach 40 years ago. But it can be done, and it's extremely meaningful to the kids, and it's meaningful to our community. It makes them feel like they know their hometown, and it feels like they are also connected to our beloved elders. Let me summarize my time of learning in the community. This archive work holds up the people, everyday people from the community. And that is anti-racist work. It's anti-sexist work, and it's anti-classist work. You don't have to be famous to know that your stories are important for the next generation. Students love this work. They said, if I'm honest, I didn't ever really believe some of those history things. But now, hearing them from so many people, I actually understand the struggles of those who went before me. Do you think that's helping to support kids in their own anti-racism? Yes. They understand these stories. And if I could do all those things, imagine what today's youth could do with the energy that's around the Black Lives Matter movement and others. Now, let's come back down to earth a little bit. This slide, sent to me by member Elizabeth Hayes, by the way, is very important. It says, and repeat after me, no matter how open-minded, socially conscious, and anti-racist I think I am, I still have old, learned, hidden biases I need to overcome. It is my responsibility to check myself daily for my stereotypes, prejudice, and ultimately my discrimination. 3 or 4 years ago at GA, there was a big track on being a white ally, and I took every one of the seminars there in Columbus, Ohio. One of the things they said to white allies is your credentials mean nothing. It doesn't matter that you change the lives of hundreds or thousands of African American kids. You walk into a room and you have to still recheck any kind of elitism you may feel, even from that work. That's to say, anti-racism is an ongoing process. Looking at the books, you may have said, and this is not even our whole collection. I've already read enough. No, I continue to read and explore this in myself and the way forward. Now, I know students were struggling with my whiteness and my otherness by asking me strange things like this. Well, first of all, they would worry for my soul. Because of some of the things I said, I was clearly not saved. They wonder why I married first and had children after. They ask what I eat if I don't eat pork or beef. They're very confused with toad food. They ask if my husband approved of me going to so many protests, why I like old people so much, and of course, why I wear Kmart clothes. This was very confusing for them because they thought teaching paid well. Now, I am going to put the meditation, let you listen to my husband's music for a little bit, and come back on for a short closing to this message. I will tell you one more idea to ponder. Last year, with no COVID, the state of Florida had 800 open positions for teaching in the public schools. 800 open positions. So, do think about your heart, who you can talk to help change the world. And let's take a little meditation.
What's going on, UU Miami?
mother. There's far too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. Don't you know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today? Father, 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 we don't have to escalate. War is not the answer. Oh no, 'cause only love can conquer hate. Don't you know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today? Oh, picket signs and picket lines, don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see, oh, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. Father, 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 who they judge us? Who are they to judge us just because our hair's long? Don't you know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today? Oh, picket signs and picket lines, don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see, oh, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on, Miami? What's going on? Oh, what's going on? Oh, what's going on?
Teaching really can help us recognize and overcome the power differentials. Our curriculum can help support students to work to end and to solve systemic racism, sexism, and classism. Teaching truly is a political act. It is the key to liberation, justice, and equity, and today I call on each of you to practice a bit of a speech. I know you haven't quite settled on a career, or maybe you're considering a career change. May I remind you how much we need justice-minded teachers. You will learn much by working with African American colleagues about how to be an ally, and they will help you become the teacher that the students of the community need. You may be asking your grandniece or your son to give up a higher status career. But remember the story of my middle daughter, Kayla? at the beginning of this message, it may be that we need to release some of the access to that privilege affords us and walk into a place that may feel uncomfortable or that makes one vulnerable to not belonging. It has been my experience that people will read your white heart correctly and help you be of real service of building beloved community in public schools.